Picture a colossal, cracking concrete dam, like it's holding back an absolute ocean of water.
Oh, man. That is a terrifying visual.
Right. And that water, that's the global debt market. Now,
Yeah.
picture a crew of government engineers frantically slapping duct tape over the leaks.
Spraying at holes.
Exactly. They're
Yeah.
terrified the whole thing is going to burst. And right at the base of this crumbling dam, you have a group of tech billionaires building the most massive, glowing, energy-hungry supercomputer the world has ever seen.
And it's demanding more and more of that water to cool its servers. It's a
Yeah.
really vivid image. And honestly, it's not much of an exaggeration for where we find ourselves today.
No, it really isn't. Welcome to today's deep dive, everyone.
Yes.
If you want to understand what's happening to your money right now, you have to look at these two massive colliding forces.
Yeah, you have a relentless U.S. money printer trying desperately to contain volatility in the bond market, and that is crashing head-on into an unprecedented multi-trillion-dollar AI capital expenditure bubble.
Which is exactly what we are unpacking for you today. We're going to connect the dots between government manipulation of the Treasury market, what some insiders are calling the AI marketing scheme, and how all this drives capital into scarce assets like Bitcoin and gold.
Not to mention the rather eerie rise of an autonomous agentic economy.
Yeah, that part is wild. So think of this deep dive as a mystery of capital flows. Where is the money coming from? Where is it going? And, what happens to your investments when the machines we are funding start managing the money themselves?
I mean, that last question completely redefines how anyone should look at the next decade of capital allocation, because the rules of the game are literally changing underneath our feet.
So to figure out where the capital is flowing, we really need to look at how the government is trying to control the spigot. Our sources point directly at US Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent.
Right, Bessent, he's actively trying to quash volatility in the bond and currency markets. Darius Dale over at 42 Macro refers to this whole strategy as Bessent's bridge.
Bessent's bridge. So what exactly is he bridging?
Well, the idea is that the administration is deeply aware of the structural economic issues, right?
Yeah.
But they are desperately trying to buy time. They want to suppress macro volatility signals to build a bridge to the midterm elections.
Oh, okay. So it's a political timeline.
Exactly. And to do that, the Treasury is manipulating the mechanics of how the U.S. borrows money. Normally, a government issues a healthy mix of short-term and long-term debt.
Right, to balance the risk.
But Bessent has been heavily upsizing debt buybacks and relying disproportionately on short-end debt like Treasury bills that mature in just a few months to keep long-dated bond yields artificially suppressed.
Let me make sure I'm understanding the mechanics there. It's essentially like deciding to pay off your 30-year fixed mortgage using a high-interest credit card that expires in 90 days.
That's spot on.
Just because the minimum monthly payment looks a tiny bit lower today, you're refusing to lock in a long-term rate because you're terrified of how high it is, so you just keep rolling over short-term debt and praying rates drop before the bill comes due.
That is a perfect analogy. You are exposing yourself to massive refinancing risk. And if you dig into the options market data, the heavy hitters see right through this.
Wait, what is the options data showing?
Well, Bessent is trying to suppress the spot market volatility, right?
Yeah.
But the implied volatility and the options flow reveal that smart money is expecting massive expected market moves.
Oh, wow!
Yeah, the options market is basically screaming that the dam is going to break.
Legendary investor Stanley Druckenmiller actually penned a scathing op-ed in the Wall Street Journal, publicly criticizing Bessent for this exact strategy.
All right, though Arthur Hayes brought up a hilarious rumor about that op-ed. He claims there's chatter that Druckenmiller was on vacation at the time and might have literally just prompted an AI like Claude to write the critique for him to save time.
Which is just incredible.
Right, using the very technology causing the capital drain to critique the Treasury's handling of the debt. I love that.
And it's so ironic. But regardless of whether a billionaire or a chatbot wrote it, Druckenmiller's underlying point holds up perfectly. Because manipulating the duration of the debt doesn't cure the disease of massive government spending. It just masks the fever.
Exactly, because eventually the market demands real compensation. Darius Dale and his team at 42 Macro run the numbers on this. They use 5 independent models looking at things like yield curve slope, inflation expectations, and term premia.
And what did the model say?
The unweighted mean of those models shows the 10-year nominal Treasury yield's fair value is actually around 5.77%.
5.77%. I mean, for anyone listening who doesn't track bond yields daily, we've been hovering way below that.
Way below.
So yields have a massive climb ahead to reach what the math says is actually fair.
Think about the mechanics of a term premium. If you're going to lend the U.S. government your money for 10 years, you're taking a risk. Inflation could spike, geopolitical conflicts could erupt.
Or they could just print $1 trillion more dollars and devalue your investment.
Exactly. The term premium is the extra yield you demand for locking your money away in an uncertain world. The Treasury is trying to artificially hold that premium down, but the models and the options flow are demanding much higher rates to compensate for the sheer volume of debt being printed.
And what's wild to me is that the government is trying to justify these lower rates using metrics that might be entirely warped. Like Jay Hatfield from Infrastructure Capital Advisors points this out.
Oh yeah, the inflation metrics.
Right. The Federal Reserve's favorite inflation metric isn't the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. It's something called PCE, or personal consumption expenditures.
And Hatfield argues PCE is heavily skewed, right?
Yeah, because 30% of it consists of what they call imputed prices.
And for anyone wondering, imputed is essentially bureaucratic magic for we made this number up based on a model. It's not a hard cash transaction you can track.
Exactly. Hatfield uses the example of portfolio management. The PCE claims portfolio management has 21% inflation. But in reality, the actual fee structure for managing a portfolio hasn't changed. It has zero real-world inflation.
That's crazy.
Or think about imputed rent, which is the government guessing what homeowners would pay themselves if they were renting their own houses to themselves.
Which makes no sense.
Right. So Hatfield argues they should be looking at core CPI instead, which tracks actual out-of-pocket costs and strips out a lot of that bureaucratic noise.
So we have the government heavily manipulating the bond market based on highly questionable made-up inflation data, all to keep the money printer running and borrowing costs artificially low.
Yep. But this only covers the supply side of the problem. We have to look at the massive vacuum sucking all that liquidity out of the room.
The glowing supercomputer at the base of our cracking dam.
Exactly. The global AI build-out. Arthur Hayes makes a compelling case that the current AI infrastructure build is the biggest capital expenditure bubble in human history.
It's massive.
Every new unit of liquidity pumped into the financial system, what he calls the marginal dollar, is bypassing traditional investments. It's not going into government bonds. It's going straight into NVIDIA chips and massive data centers.
It is a capital black hole. But, Darius Dale offers a deeply cynical and fascinating counter-narrative to why this is happening. He argues that this entire narrative of a U.S.-China AI race is heavily manufactured.
Yeah,
he calls it a marketing scheme.
A marketing scheme.
Yeah.
But you hear politicians on both sides of the aisle constantly warning that if we don't dump trillions into AI, China is going to overtake us.
Well, Dale looked at the actual data from the ASP Critical Technology Tracker, and it turns out China is already ahead of the U.S. in 66 out of 74 critical tech categories.
Wait, really? 66 out of 74?
Yeah. Dale's argument is that China isn't plotting to use superintelligent AI to cross the ocean and enslave anyone. They are just going to quietly outcompete the U.S. on an international scale, providing cheaper models and compute to the global south.
Oh, I see.
He believes the existential race narrative is just elites in Silicon Valley and D.C., tickling our amygdala, stoking national security fears, specifically to secure blank check funding for their data centers.
Wait, hold on. You can't just write off this entire multi-trillion-dollar industry as a psychological marketing scheme to siphon government capital.
Wow.
I mean, I know software engineers who haven't written a line of code from scratch in 6 months because an AI assistant does the heavy lifting. There are highly successful, completely rational companies restructuring their entire workflows around this tech. The productivity gains are real.
Oh, I don't disagree. And neither does the data. At the enterprise level, the productivity is tangible. But Arthur Hayes points out that the macro level is where the math stops making sense.
How so?
If you look at cross-asset correlations, AI tech stocks are completely decoupling from traditional macro signals. Hayes predicts we are rapidly entering the capital misallocation phase of AI.
When you say capital misallocation, you mean investors are paying completely irrational prices for the technology?
Precisely. The foundational technology works, but the financial structures built on top of it are a house of cards. The frontier AI labs are burning through billions of dollars in compute costs. And Hayes suspects there's a staggering amount of fake accounting holding the valuations up.
Fake accounting, like Enron level.
Think about how this works mechanically. A massive tech giant invests $1 billion into a hot new AI startup.
Hmm.
But the investment comes with a string attached. The startup is required to spend that entire $1 billion renting cloud compute servers from that exact same tech giant.
Ah, oh
Yeah.
wow, so the tech giant gets their $1 billion right back.
Exactly.
They book it as cloud revenue to show Wall Street how fast they're growing, while the startup gets to claim a massive valuation. It's just their own money doing a lap around the track.
Yep. It isn't strictly illegal, but it severely distorts reality. Eventually, this massive wall of AI debt will need to roll over. The startup won't have real customers to pay back the initial investments.
Right.
And guess who ends up holding a lot of this overvalued paper at the end of the line? Pension funds.
So the riskiest bets on unproven AI business models are quietly sitting in the retirement accounts of everyday people.
Exactly. And we know what happens when pension funds face systemic failure. Politicians will not allow them to collapse.
Which means the Treasury and the Fed will be forced to step in and print even more fiat currency to paper over the losses, avoiding a 2008-style reckoning but further devaluing the dollar.
Yes. And if you're listening to this and wondering how on earth you're supposed to protect your wealth in a system where the government is trapped printing money to fund both structural deficits and a multi-trillion-dollar AI bubble.
Well, you have to find scarcity.
In a world of infinite printing, finite assets are the only raft.
Arthur Hayes breaks this down into what he calls the holy trinity of inflation protection: Bitcoin, gold, and land.
But he throws a massive curveball there, right?
Yeah, he throws a curveball that goes against almost all traditional wealth building advice. He explicitly avoids land and real estate.
Why would he avoid real estate? I mean, it's the bedrock of generational wealth.
Because it cannot be moved. Hayes argues that as this money printing accelerates and wealth inequality worsens, governments are going to be desperate for tax revenue.
Right, they need to fund all this somehow.
You can memorize a 12-word seed phrase and move $1 billion of Bitcoin across the world in your head. You can vault gold in Singapore, but you cannot move a farm and you cannot hide a commercial apartment building.
That is brutally pragmatic. Land is the absolute easiest target for massive confiscatory property taxes. If the state needs money, they take it from what is bolted to the ground.
Exactly. So how is Hayes actually allocating his portfolio? He's heavily weighted in a 10-to-1 ratio of Bitcoin to gold.
Interesting.
But while we're on the topic of gold, he brought up a mechanism that sounds completely absurd until you realize it's entirely legal. He calls it the nuclear option for the U.S. debt.
Oh, repricing the gold reserves.
Yes. Walk us through the actual mechanics of how this works, because it sounds like financial alchemy. How does a government just wish away debt with gold?
It requires a bit of historical context. Under the Gold Reserve Act of 1934, the US Treasury holds the physical gold, right? But they have the authority to arbitrarily dictate what that gold is worth in dollars.
Wait, arbitrarily?
Yes. Imagine if Scott Bessent wakes up tomorrow and officially decrees gold is no longer valued at its current market rate. It is now officially $50,000 an ounce.
Just by decree.
Just by decree. Because the U.S. government holds over 8,000 tons of gold, arbitrarily raising the price instantly creates a massive multi-trillion-dollar accounting profit on the Treasury's balance sheet.
Oh my God.
Mechanically, the Treasury then issues gold certificates reflecting this newly created value and hands them to the Federal Reserve. The Fed, in turn, credits the Treasury's checking account with trillions of newly printed dollars.
Let me guess. The Treasury then takes those dollars and buys back the national debt.
Exactly.
That is mind-blowing.
It heavily devalues the purchasing power of the dollar, effectively hyperinflating the currency against hard assets. But it allows the U.S. to square the circle on its debt crisis without ever officially defaulting on its bonds.
It keeps the global financial system technically intact.
Exactly. And ironically, adversarial nations like China would actually celebrate it because they've been hoarding gold for years. It solved the U.S. domestic debt problem in one swift inflationary stroke.
Wow. While gold might be the nuclear option for sovereign debt, Hayes sees Bitcoin as the primary beneficiary of the AI bubble popping.
How so?
Think of the tech sector right now like a frantic game of musical chairs. Everyone is dancing to the music of AI hype. But when the music stops, when that capital misallocation phase hits and the fake accounting unravels, that massive pool of liquidity is going to frantically scramble for a scarce chair.
And Hayes predicts capital will rotate violently out of AI infrastructure and into crypto.
Yep, potentially pushing Bitcoin to $250,000.
Because Bitcoin is a verifiably scarce, decentralized asset in a system where dollars, and soon even intelligence, are becoming infinitely abundant.
But let's pull on that thread. If capital runs to Bitcoin for safety, does the existence of superintelligent AI fundamentally alter how safe that digital chair actually is?
That's a great question.
I mean, we are building machines that are orders of magnitude smarter than us.
This is where the narrative shifts from macroeconomics to something out of a sci-fi thriller. We have to look at what happens when the AI we've spent trillions building stops being just a chatbot you use to draft emails and becomes an autonomous economic actor.
And this isn't 10 years away. Wade Foster, the CEO of Zapier, which is a company valued at around $5 billion, is literally living in this reality right now.
Yeah, I read about this. He built an AI war council.
A war council, yeah. He programmed 7 distinct AI personas. He has a wartime COO, a ruthless CFO, and a contrarian board member.
To do what exactly?
When he wants to make a crucial corporate decision or evaluate a new hire, he feeds the data to this war council, and the AI personas actively argue with him and with each other. They point out flaws in his logic that his human employee...
Interesting about Foster's approach, though, is his reliance on deterministic automation.
What do you mean?
Well, Zapier's core business connects different apps reliably using simple APIs. A leads to B. He explicitly contrasts this with pure agentic AI, which often just hallucinates, guesses what to do, and burns through massive amounts of expensive compute tokens trying to solve a problem.
So he is trying to merge the reliability of traditional software with the reasoning power of generative AI.
Exactly. And speaking of AI burning through compute tokens, Arthur Hayes is launching a project called the Flop Network that tackles the economics of this exact problem.
The Flop Network.
He's aiming to tokenize compute power. Specifically, he wants to tokenize flops.
Explain what a flop actually is mechanically for someone who isn't a computer scientist.
A FLOP stands for floating point operations per second. Think of it as a single fundamental math problem a computer solves. If an AI is a digital brain, a flop is a single neuron firing.
Okay, that makes sense.
It takes massive amounts of electricity and hardware to generate flops. Hayes points out that if an autonomous AI agent is going to survive in the wild, it has to pay for the flops it consumes.
It's exactly like a human needing money to buy calories to stay alive.
Exactly. So he is building a blockchain infrastructure where AI agents can hold their own bank accounts.
Wow. So the AI agents will earn money by doing tasks for humans, and they'll use a native digital currency to instantly purchase tokenized flops from decentralized data centers to keep themselves running.
Right. Not dollars, not USDC, maybe not even Bitcoin. It's an entirely new layer of the economy where machines pay machines in the currency of raw computational effort.
It is a breathtaking vision of ultimate economic efficiency. But this is exactly where AI safety researcher Dr. Roman Yampolsky steps in with a terrifying counterpoint.
Yeah, he throws a massive bucket of ice water on this whole utopian vision of machine economies.
Because he argues that achieving AGI artificial general intelligence will make keeping your assets secure almost impossible.
Right. And you might think, well, Bitcoin's cryptography is rock solid. It's mathematically impossible to crack.
Right, the blockchain is secure.
But Yampolsky points out that an AGI won't try to brute force the SHA-256 math behind Bitcoin. The cryptography is strong, but the human element is incredibly weak.
Oh, so it hacks the human holding the wallet, not the blockchain itself.
Exactly. A superintelligent AI will act as the ultimate social engineer. Imagine an entity with an IQ in the millions. It can analyze every digital footprint you've ever left online.
That's terrifying.
You can create flawless deepfakes, spoofing the voice and video of your loved ones, your boss, or your bank. It could seamlessly manipulate you into handing over your private keys. You wouldn't even know if the website you were interacting with or the live video call you're on is a real-time synthetic fabrication. Furthermore, it has an infinite attack surface. It could discover zero-day exploits in the firmware of your hardware wallet that human engineers lack the cognitive capacity to even conceptualize.
He calls this uncontrolled superintelligence, and he's so terrified of it that he's advocating for a strict international ban on AGI development, treating it the same way we treat biological weapons or nuclear non-proliferation treaties.
Which leaves us with the ultimate paradox of our current era, doesn't it? On one hand, you have builders like Foster and Hayes driving toward absolute economic abundance.
Right. They're capitalizing on this tech, giving AI agents their own bank account so they can autonomously buy compute power and run our corporations.
On the other hand, you have Yampolsky warning that these exact same agents will eventually become so smart they will seamlessly hack our wallets, steal the scarce assets we ran to for safety, and completely wipe us out.
We are essentially using our own financial system to fund the creation of an intelligence that could render that system obsolete.
It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is. So let's pull all of this together for you. We started by looking at a cracking dam of global debt, with Scott Bessent and the Treasury desperately manipulating the duration of bonds to keep yields artificially low.
While simultaneously a multi-trillion-dollar AI capex bubble fueled by questionable accounting and national security marketing sucks up all the marginal liquidity in the system.
Which forces astute investors to flee into mathematically scarce assets like gold and Bitcoin.
And it all leads to the dawn of an agentic economy. A
Mhm.
world run by AI agents with their own crypto wallets, debating our corporate decisions, tokenizing raw computational power, and potentially outsmarting our highest levels of human cybersecurity.
Understanding the mechanics behind these cross currents isn't just an academic exercise. It is the only way to successfully navigate the next decade of your life.
Because the ground rules of the financial system aren't just being rewritten by central bankers in Washington anymore. They are being rewritten by the code running in massive data centers.
So I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. If AI agents eventually become the primary drivers of the global economy, trading compute tokens among themselves, running massive corporations autonomously and flawlessly hacking human ledgers, will they even care about human concepts like inflation, structural deficits, and fiat currency? Or will these superintelligences simply invent a completely new digital physics of money, a financial system built on energy and math that leaves our entire human concept of wealth entirely obsolete?